again. I have 7 or 8 books for you to look at with me. Who knows how long this next little stretch of being all contained might last. So give you some ideas for something you might like to read. And boy, oh boy, we have some pretty snazzy titles for you. Now, the first one up is When Things Are Alive, They Hum by Hannah Bent. And this comes to us from Ultimo Press. Woo! Now there's a nice read for us. This is Australian. This is Australian. It is debut, and it is set between England and Hong Kong. It is a book that distinguishes itself on the grounds that we have a narrative coming from 2 perspectives. 2 sisters, Marlowe and Harper, and of these 2, Harper has Down syndrome and has a congenital heart disease and has been sick for a lot of her life. Now, when we open the story, Marlowe's in London with her wonderful boyfriend Ollie. She's lovely men. Hannah Bent writes lovely men in this, and her sister Harper is in Hong Kong with various family members. They have lost their mother, and they're still processing grief. So this is part of the story, and we do get. Which is something that Hannah Bent does exceptionally well, inside the head of Harper with her way of looking at the world. The narrative sort of centres around this thread that Harper is constantly unwell, and at the point that we join the story, it looks like she's not doing very well at all, and nobody wants to upset Marlowe in London, and she shoots over to Hong Kong, and it becomes very evident that her sister Harper needs a heart transplant, and this is what Marlowe really wants to get for her. And Harper, we're not sure whether Harper is really on board with this, because she loves her own wise, generous, funny, quirky heart. But there'll be a lot of other things in the mix. Probably my vote for the cutest person in the whole book goes to Louis, who's Harper's boyfriend. And I thought that relationship was gloriously well written. It's a very unusual book. It's very heartfelt. It's got lots of sentiment. And the driving force behind this is feeling what we feel, how we care, how we decide what's good for someone else because we love them. It's a book all about love. It's very, very nicely written. And it's kind of its driving force is this feeling, this great care, nurture that Marlowe wants to sort of show her sister. And, there's that underlying conversation about, is Harper able to make decisions for herself? So we're into the terrain of agency, making up my own mind. Am I able to articulate what I need as a less abled person? It's a fabulous read, highly recommended. That one, lots to think about. Super. So that comes to us from Ultimo Press, as I've said, which is a new press coming out with some very interesting books this year. Now, second up, another super read is Joanna, Glen, All My Mothers. And this comes to us from, I'm sneaking on the side because it's Borough Books, which is HarperCollins. 2 years ago, I think it was, she wrote the other half of Augusta Hope, and I did go a little bit nuts for that one. It goes into that category of my super good reads. And All My Mothers does not disappoint as a follow-up. It's not related, but as another novel by this great storyteller, Joanna Glen. It is set between England and Spain. Now, she really knows her Spain very well, loves it, and you very like The Way of Still Life by Sarah Winman, which I have been recommending to you to get you out of yourselves, to allow us travel. This is another book that just lets you travel. It's full of the glorious, messy love of human relationships, but mostly our main character, Eva, knows from photographs that the mother that she calls mother is not her birth mother, even though for a long time there is a pretense that she is. Her father is always disappearing off to do things, and she's very suspicious that things may not be as simple as she thinks they are. And then finds in one of her father's books a photograph of a very small baby held by someone whose head we can't see in a kind of a grey habit or dress with this patio, and this evokes something, but she's not sure what. It is about this search for her biological mother, but it's also about how other women in her life, particularly the mother of her best friend, who's a big, glorious, messy, mother who sort of embraces her in this very sort of Barbara Trapido kind of family, you know, where you have these larger than life families, and how other people that she comes across, even the mother that she's called mother for her life, how there are transformations in their love story. It is glorious. It's kind of a kaleidoscope of colour, of sensation, of history, the Spanish Moorish sort of architecture, the way place is described. It's very, very, very lovely. If you want to get out of lockdown, in one sense, there's one for you. Now I've galloped ahead of my own notes, which is typical of me. Next one up, I read Molly Greeley's first one. This is Molly Greeley's The Heiress by, again, this comes from Hodder and Stoughton, which is a Hachette book, and it is the life of, you know, it's one of these Jane Austen-esque stories, what people call a spin-off, but with the sort of careful distinction between romanticised and sentimental sort of, you know, versions of Jane Austen's other characters or main characters. In this one, having read The Clergyman's Wife, which was Molly Greeley's first one, the writing is very, it does great justice. It honours the writing of Jane Austen, I suppose I really want to say. It's kind of unpretentious, very clever in that it sort of, it doesn't mimic Austen's writing, but it keeps the same tone, the same flavour. But in the previous book, we looked at the life of Charlotte Lucas. In this book, we're looking at the life of Lady Catherine de Bourgh's daughter, Anne de Bourgh, who, if you remember, was a peevish and sickly child, who is come into a great fortune. And this is part of the relationship between Catherine de Bourgh and Anne de Bourgh. Lady Catherine is keeping her under control. So what Greeley has used as her premise is that Lady Catherine de Bourgh has kept her daughter addicted to laudanum. Therefore, this continuing unwellness. And this is, as she writes this kind of haze of not knowing what's going on and of not being quite well, and yet kind of suspecting that there is another way of living. And this is where she makes a move and wants to live that other life and sort of, I suppose, wean herself off with the help of friends. It's a very lovely unconventional romance in there, a gorgeous read, and the writing is top class. So if you love any Jane Austen, and you're all of the Jane Austens, you will not be impatient or frustrated with this one, because she has that tone. It's a rare thing, but it's lovely. Next one up. Goodness, I've got a lot of these, and I am going to be kind of galloping because I don't want to keep you all sort of, when she could just shut up. The Paper Palace by Miranda, Cowley, Helen, and this one comes to us from Viking Penguin. And it took me a while to pick that one up because I wasn't kind of sure of the cover, and Paper Palace, I had no idea what I was letting myself into, and my brain sort of said newspapers. Oh my goodness gracious me, pick it up. This is a total humdinger. It really, in one sense, very, very simply put, it is the story of one episode of infidelity, and a woman has to choose between two people. It's a time old, it really is one of the oldest stories. Fidelity or infidelity. And what again, these books all distinguish themselves for one reason or another. That's why I'm telling you about them. There are two reasons why I love this one, I suppose. I could say one is that there is an evocation of place. We are in the States. We are in various locations, so it's not just rooting us in one, but we are very rooted with our main character in this story to a lakeside or pond, they call it a pond, side cabin, which has been a childhood holiday home, and it's nothing glamorous. Even the pond ain't glamorous. And the sort of the way that Hella describes all the kind of the backwoods, there's something dark and there's something muddy and something very natural, very sort of not seamy dirt, but there is a thread in the book which is darker and maybe a little bit not disturbing. We're all grown-ups, as I keep saying to you. I hope we are. But it's a place which just fills this book with intense atmosphere. And then the story is not so much about the ripples, we're in ponds, aren't we? The ripples or the after effects of this. It's why we ever got, why do we ever get to this place of finding we have to choose or feeling we need to choose. There is a strong theme of women and marriage and the expectation to take safe options or to take unsafe sort of strange options maybe, and which one are we going to go for. There is a theme of strength that even though our main character and let's say her mother, whose life we visit, don't necessarily get on and kind of hit and miss, the mother would always have said the real bravery is facing the thing you've done and acknowledging it. And there is a lot of bravery in this book, but it is I don't know what it is about it. You go back in time, you watch their childhood, her mother's childhood, you watch these little sort of nastinesses of step siblings, and one case of rather intense nastiness on behalf of one, and this enduring friendship stroke love affair with her childhood friend who has known her since a very, very young age, and their shared history in events. I couldn't put it down. It was just sort of epically glorious, even though, and it's not bleak, definitely isn't bleak. It's just filled with so many things for us to look at and think about, and wit and observation. Loved it. I'll shut up. Well, I won't. I just put this one down. I'm just putting this here because some of you will know it's a one to keep in mind for that next big event, which is Father's Day. So it's Daniel Silva. It's another Gabrielle Allon thriller. You all know about this one called The Cellist, and that's HarperCollins as well. I'm not going to review it because I haven't read it. The next one I am going to review is another Australian one that comes to us from Scribe. It's called The Golden Book. It's by Kate Ryan, and it is a debut. And this was the most intriguing book, partly because it does an astonishing thing, which is it describes a childhood and a childhood friendship. And for someone like me who's come here from Ireland, and I'll be talking about this from one of my later books, it was an astonishing ability for me to connect to all of those things that I recognise from my own childhood that are obviously so universal, while knowing nothing about the childhood setting or place or particular sort of cultural differences that would have made this childhood so special to Australian readers maybe who've experienced something like this. I haven't. Mine was a very, I don't want to say sedate, but suburban South County Dublin childhood, more or less on the sea. So very, very different. We have got again, we have a childhood. We have two girls, Ali and Jessie, who are sort of best friends. And Jessie's very wayward and decided about things and a bit of a wild thing. And I think this is what Kate Ryan is commenting on, is that, you know, when we look at our own children and we see their wildnesses and their things that we consider naughty or, as they get older, reckless, why shouldn't we be looking back at our own childhood and saying, hang on a minute, was I any better? So there is a little bit of that narrative going on, because we have Ali with her childhood friend Jess and that age, and then we have Ali now looking at her own daughter who's getting to that stroppy teenage, and her new partner's daughter, so her stepdaughter, who is a little bit sort of not always very responsible about things. So that there's and it's about acceptance. But just the thing, or the stream, that the thread that keeps us going in this is this golden book that these two girls have contributed to, with ideas from Jessie, because she's not very good at reading and writing, and Ali is very good at both of those. And they have a book of quests, and the quests are mostly Jessie's ideas, and they usually involve some delicious danger, and sometimes that danger is just, you know, Ali kind of resents it and is afraid of things. Jessie makes her do things, and when she gets in, she realises, gee, I really love this thing that I'm doing, which is a very weird truth from our childhood, is that, you know, come on, you love it. Then you go in and you go, oh golly, yes, I do love it now. It's a gloriously well-written book. There are blurrings between the boundaries of this happened in this state and this happened in this state, and I'm telling you to bear with it, because it does confuse that kind of trauma memory. So those lines are very deliberately blurred. Beautifully written, an absolute joy, so look out for that one. Golden Book by Kate Ryan. From Scribe, I thump the desk table will be cross. Next one up, I am reading. Have not finished, but I'm saying, oh my God, that's already a goodie. So it's The Rome Zoo by Pascal Janovjak. This is from Black Ink. It is a translator, translated by Stephanie Smee, who's done quite a lot of translation from the French. I picked this up going, oh, I like the cover. It's a great start. Oh, wow. It's really interesting because we're in the space of, space of a space. We're at the Rome Zoological Gardens, and the story starts with an Algerian gentleman who comes and he's trying to negotiate his way across Rome, and at one point the blue dot on his phone leads him through this expanse and he doesn't really know what it is, and when he gets to the gates he realises he's being directed that he'd have to get across the zoo, which would be the shortest route to where he's going to. Now that's one thread, and we go back to 1910, we go back to Hagenbeck's giving them the designs for the zoo, so it's all historically very accurate. Written with an unerring eye for the details that are important and that spare prose that leaves out the stuff you don't need. So it's you get that translated feel. There's a little bit almost of a South American feel in this in places, but it's about the crisscrossing of that space of the zoo. So as our Algerian in the I think the book finishes in 2011, crosses the space, he comes across a young woman, Joanna, who is going to be taking over more or less the running of the zoo, and they will connect several times in this space, and then the zoo has become dilapidated, it's become a total mess, it needs to be saved, and there will be a couple of tragedies. We've got a couple of nice zookeepers. I haven't finished it, but boy oh boy, I am, it's very different and it's very tight writing, and I do love that. I'm very much in favour of it. And last one up, woohoo! This is my only non-fiction book, and for the moment, again, it's one I can't recommend highly enough. And I know I don't tell you a lot about my non-fiction. This one is called Imaginative Possession, Learning to Live in the Antipodes by Belinda Probert, and it comes to us from Upswell Press, which is another very small press that is starting to put out these books that I think, for the moment, seem to have a very well researched feel, but I'll tell you about this and then I'll tell you what I think about it. It's what totally grabbed me from the very beginning, because I think the premise of this book is relevant to someone like me and will also be relevant to people who've been born and bred in Australia, more or less bred. As you all know, I was born in Ireland. I didn't come here till I was, in my 50s. So, and that's more or less, I think Belinda Probert came here a lot earlier, but she comes from Kent in England, and she arrives in Australia, and she's fascinated about, what I am fascinated about is how do we connect to a place like Australia? How do you make this your home? How, and can we? So the Imaginative Possession comes from George Seddon's book, when he writes about the old country, and he writes about that you can possess a place, or that you can, I don't think we ever own place, that's not a thing, but you can belong through this imaginative possession. So by knowing its history, knowing the culture, knowing the stories, understanding what you're seeing, and then through the environment, then finding your sense of identity. The book is divided into sections, so there's a bit of her history, how she came here, some of her journeys, and then she buys a property, 28 acres, if I'm not wrong, in the Otway Ranges, and this is when she really starts. She's lived in other places and lectured and taught, but in this one spot, she has decided she wants to start a garden. And it's actually quite funny how she writes about, well, you can't ever buy a big garden. You have to buy so many acres or hectares, and it might be established or it might not, and there might be exotic plants or trees, and they might not be good things or bad things. So she goes through everything about snakes, about everything that she had to discover and that I discover with her, and that some of you will already know very, very well, but it's particularly fascinating to me. And it's particularly fascinating because she references so many other writers. When she's talking about bird life, then she'll refer back to the people that we would consider the experts on Australian bird life, and why all your birds are so noisy that it's a good thing. I'm still hanging out for my little chirping, thrushes and robins and blackbirds, and now I'm going to be sent off to look at other books that will tell me why the squawking and raucous stuff is essential. I'm What I like as well is you can read a chapter and put it down and mull. And then you come back and you read the next chapter, but there's some graceful sort of ease to her writing, which is astonishing, given that it's so heavily, isn't it? It's referenced so well. It's an absolute treasure trove of what living in Australia is like and how to connect to it. And I'm sure you will all be thoroughly drawn in by that too. So. A great one for anybody interested in particularly the kind of the botanics, the wildlife, the history of this country, which is immense. How about that then? There are a couple of nice ones. I'll whoosh them all over so you can have another look. We'll put the list up on with the video, and there is something there for absolutely everyone, and I, hand on heart, think they're all terrific. Well, I can't say much about it. I will love you and leave you. I hope to see you in the shop in the next while, but if not, you know what to do. Talk to you again soon. Bye.